Bank heists have long captivated our imaginations with their daring schemes and high-stakes drama. But have you ever wondered which robberies stand out as the most daring and successful? From meticulously planned tunnel escapes to high-profile bank takeovers, these heists push the limits of criminal ingenuity. In this exploration, we'll delve into the 10 greatest bank robberies in history, where the amount of money stolen is staggering. Banco Rio robbery, Buenos Aires, $20 million. One of the most daring and bizarre heists in modern history took place in Buenos Aires, where a group of thieves pulled off a nearly cinematic plan to rob Banco Rio in 2006. The robbers, disguised as customers and armed to the teeth, entered at the bank and took dozens of hostages, making a big scene to fool the authorities. But unlike ordinary robbers, these individuals had a sophisticated plan. While they kept the police busy negotiating the release of the hostages, they had dug an underground tunnel that led them from the security room to a hidden exit. The whole negotiation was a ruse to buy time. In the end, the thieves left without a trace, taking about $20 million in cash and jewelry. What made this robbery even more interesting was the fact that the thieves left a written message for the police at the bank. In cash, no love. It was a perfect blow to the authorities, who were spectacularly deceived. Although some members of the gang were later arrested, most of the money was never found, making this one of the most famous robberies in Latin America. Boston Bank robbery, $30 million. In one of the largest bank robberies in the United States, a group organized by notorious criminal Anthony Fats Pino entered a Boston bank branch on January 17, 1950. The group consisted of a team of 11 thieves who, in a detailed plan, they did what would be known as the biggest bank robbery up to that time. The planning was nearly perfect. The gang entered the bank when it was closed and neutralized the security guards without using weapons, making off with nearly $2.7 million in cash and checks, about $30 million in today's value. It was an act that required great courage and skill, and for a long time the police were without any clear leads. The robbers thought they had pulled off the perfect heist, but a simple mistake proved fatal. One of the gang members, Joseph Specs O'Keefe, was arrested for another crime and began speaking out to save himself. This led the police to discover the identities of other robbers, and most of them ended up in prison. Meanwhile, most of the stolen money was never found. Their story inspired movies and books, and while it was a brilliant plan, it was defeated by human frailty, the betrayal of a friend. The Brinks robbery, $39 million. In the winter of 1983, a group of thieves made British crime history when they carried out the infamous Brinks robbery at Heathrow Airport. The group had planned to rob only cash, but when they got to the safety deposit boxes, they were surprised to find $39 million worth of gold bars and diamonds. What started as an ordinary robbery turned into one of the biggest scandals in British criminal history. The stolen gold bars were melted down and distributed on black markets around the world, making them difficult to find. But the robbery came at a high cost to the criminals. Most of them were betrayed by their accomplices, and some ended up in prison or were killed during clashes with the authorities. This robbery forever changed the world of crime in Britain, and its value still resonates in history as one of the biggest heists ever carried out. It became the inspiration for movies and TV shows, while the search to find the remaining gold bars continued for years. Great Train robbery, Britain, $50 million. One of the most famous and dramatized robberies in history, the Great Train robbery of 1963, was not a bank robbery in the classic sense, but it is worth mentioning because of its audacity. This group of 15 people, made up of some of Britain's most notorious criminals, stopped a train carrying money from British banks to London. After using a false signal to stop the train in an isolated location, the robbers boarded the train and made off with almost £2.6 million in cash, about $50 million in today's value. More than just money was being stolen. This was a challenge to a system that seemed unbreakable. However, their success quickly faded. Almost all the members of the gang were arrested, including the famous leader, Bruce Reynolds. Most of the money was never found, but Ronnie Biggs, one of them, managed to escape and lived in Brazil for decades, making the story of the train robbery a myth in the criminal world. The British Bank of the Middle East, bank robbery, Beirut, $50 to $100 million. Among the most famous robberies ever to take place in a war zone is that of the Bank of the British Bank of the Middle East in Beirut. In the midst of the Lebanese Civil War, chaos was in every corner of the country. But while most people were fighting for survival, a group of robbers had an extraordinary plan. Taking advantage of the chaos, they infiltrated the bank by digging a tunnel that led them directly to the vault. When the bank's doors opened the next morning, staff couldn't believe what they were seeing. Gold, money, and valuable jewelry were gone. No break-ins or signs of violence were visible, but the value of the money taken was astronomical, between $50 and $100 million. The robbery was a perfect coup, carried out with a calmness and sophistication that left everyone speechless. At the heart of this crime lay a challenge to order and stability, at a time when the citizens of Beirut were dealing with daily violence and insecurity. This robbery shattered trust even more. Many of the bank's customers never saw their possessions again, and although some robbers were caught, most of the treasure was never found. Banco Central robbery in Fortaleza, Brazil, $70 million. When we talk about robberies that require months of precise planning and organization, the Banco Central robbery in Fortaleza is the perfect example. The gang stayed behind the scenes for months, taking over a house near the bank and starting to dig a 78-meter tunnel to the vault. This tunnel was no simple opening in the ground. It was equipped with ventilation and lighting, looking like a real engineering construction project. Until the last day, no one suspected their movements. They had managed to infiltrate the bank's treasury without making a noise, making off with $70 million. The value of this robbery did not lie only in the large amount, but in the skill with which it was carried out. There was a certain tragic irony that, while the world continued to think of classic armed robberies, these thieves were underground, getting away with an incredible fortune. However, their success was short-lived. After an extensive investigation, a large part of the gang was arrested and some of the money was recovered. But some of them managed to escape, and for years, the mystery of the missing money has continued to fire the imagination of many people. Securitas Security Deposit Robbery, Kent, $92 million. One of the most sophisticated and violent robberies of modern times was that of the Securitas Insurance Deposit in Kent, England. In February 2006, a group of thieves used a masterful and brutal plan to pull off what remains to this day one of England's biggest heists. First, the criminals kidnapped the warehouse manager, Colin Dixon, and then cornered his wife and young son, threatening them with violence to force them to cooperate. With his family under threat, Dixon was forced to help thieves break into the vault, where millions in cash were kept. After neutralizing the guards and staff, they made off with $92 million. But, as often happens, inattention and arrogance betrayed them. Many of the gang members were arrested after a long and complicated investigation involving security agents from Britain and other countries. The money was partially recovered, while some of the robbers are still at large, making this one of the most sensational crime stories of the 21st century. Knightsbridge Bank Robbery, London, $97 million. In the 1980s London, a charismatic Italian named Valerio Vice became the symbol of a modern gangster. He had organized several bank robberies before planning his masterpiece, the Knightsbridge Bank. Entering the bank as an ordinary customer, he and his associates asked to get a security room. But once inside, things changed dramatically. After drawing their weapons, they neutralized the staff and took control of the entire bank. The safe rooms, containing the assets of wealthy clients from around the world, were opened one after another. In a coordinated action, they made off with millions in cash and jewelry, causing a scandal in London. What made this heist even more interesting was the appearance of Vice. He was not just a criminal, but a personality. When the British police began to investigate, they discovered that he had created a life of luxury in London, where he often appeared in style and class, as if he had committed no crime. But after several months of pursuit, Vici was arrested and extradited to Italy, where he ended up in prison. Hatton Garden Robbery, London, $200 million. When a group of elderly pensioners decided to pull off a heist in 2015, no one would have thought they would be responsible for one of the biggest heists in London's history. This group, known as the Pension Thieves, was made up mainly of individuals over the age of 60 who had been involved in crime for decades. This robbery, which involved breaking into an insurance deposit in the Hatton Garden area, shocked the public as it was carried out by a group of elderly people. Using sophisticated and advanced tools to break through the walls and enter the security room, the thieves managed to get away with a large amount of gold, cash, and jewelry. The amount stolen amounted to about $200 million. The robbery was detailed and well planned, but what made it even more unique was the advanced age of the participants. But even though they had planned every detail, their age betrayed them in the simplest way. They left behind some small clues that led to their capture. This heist not only inspired movies and books, but also became synonymous with an older generation of criminals who refused to stop despite the passing years. Bank of Iraq robbery, $920 million. Among the biggest and most daring bank robberies in history was that of the Central Bank of Iraq. In 2003, as time was running out on Saddam Hussein's regime, he decided to ensure that some of his wealth was out of the control of the US-led coalition. A hand-delivered order, believed to have been written by Saddam himself, was sent to the central bank, where his son, Qusay Hussein, received nearly $920 million. This act was neither a classic armed robbery nor an organized undercover robbery. It was a pure act of power, where the absolute authority of a dictator was used to destroy any possibility of opposition. Large trucks transported the money away from Baghdad. But, despite all care, the fate of this plan was not happy. During the American occupation, the coalition forces seized some of these funds, while the rest remained missing. At the heart of the drama of this robbery lay not only the staggering value, but also the fact that the regime that organized it was rapidly collapsing. The wealth, resilience, and identity of a nation was disappearing with this money, marking the beginning of the end for the Hussein dynasty. These were the biggest cases of bank heists, where criminals made off with staggering sums of money. But at the end of the day, most of them ended up behind bars, just like the thieves who stole a mere $1,000. Crime may seem thrilling, but it almost always leads to the same fate.